At Penji is our commitment to helping those who are making sacrifices to help others. Thank you to those making a difference in your community. We are currently accepting applications for Penji for nonprofits. If you know a nonprofit or you are one yourself, head over to penji.co and click on Penji for Good at the bottom of the website to learn how to qualify. If you are listening to this podcast and are not a nonprofit, well, welcome. Become a customer by using the custom coupon code within the podcast show notes. Proceeds of all sales goes directly back to the nonprofit from this interview. Now, back to the show.
Okay, Clayton, before we start the podcast, I'm going to do cancel or keep with you. So let's start. 4-day work week, cancel or keep.
Let's keep that.
Unlimited PTO policies.
Cancel.
Hiring influencers instead of traditional ads.
Let's keep that.
Remote-only companies.
We'll keep that.
Firing clients who drain too much time.
Ooh, we're definitely keeping that one.
Donating to large nonprofits instead of local ones.
We'll keep that. Depends on the org.
All right. That was pretty good. Thank you so much for doing this. Guys, welcome to Unified Purpose. You guys know what this podcast is about. We share inspiring tales of compassion. We talk about resilience. We talk about community spirit. I'm your host, Daniela. You guys know me. I'm Penji's Partnership Coordinator. And I have a great guest today with me, Clayton Ferrara from Ideas for Us. Hi, Clayton. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for welcoming me. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. I'm actually when we were looking into organizations to have on the podcast, yours was really interesting to me. I always love nonprofits that have kind of environmental focuses. It's probably one of the biggest things that we need to focus on right now, if you ask me. So to kind of get the ball rolling, get us started, can you tell me a little bit about Ideas for Us, what you guys do for anybody who's watching or listening that is not familiar, just the whole shebang that we got now.
Of course. So Ideas for Us, we are an environmental action organization. And, it's interesting. I'm a millennial, and the narrative my whole life has been to learn about all of these environmental issues that we're facing in the world, from species extinction to biodiversity collapse to climate related things, you name it, global warming, and even as far back as the hole in the ozone layer, right? And the narrative has always been, these are problems that the adult world has created, and we're going to leave young people to it. And it's your job to solve these problems. See you later, right? And one of the problems from that narrative that I would say environmental education has focused on for the last 30 years or so has actually been a destructive narrative. And that is what led to us creating Ideas for Us. So advocacy only environmental work is very important because it educates the public about these problems, but it doesn't really give them a discourse to follow to solve it or to organize for action in their own communities. And what then happens is people start to feel very small against these global problems, very isolated in a system that they don't understand. And it leads to a lot of apathy and a lot of disenfranchisement among young people. And unfortunately, as this environmental narrative of educating people on the problems has increased, we've also seen depression, anxiety, hopelessness, apathy increase as well, especially among young people. So our organization started in a dorm room back in 2008 to be an environmental action organization. So everything that we do revolves around environmental action in 5 areas: energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. And of course, all of those things have so many intersectionalities between them that's what makes our projects so fantastic and so game changing. to create policy and ordinance and different types of mandates and gather communities around these issues and really move the needle on climate and environmental action. So we're headquartered in Orlando, Florida, but we've done work in nearly 40 different countries around the world. Right now, we have about 11 branches that are highly active in places like Uganda, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Nepal, Romania, Bolivia, and many, many more. So that's a little bit about us.
That's amazing. I love that you guys have worked with so many countries that have different environmental issues. I feel like sometimes we tend to be very kind of Eurocentric or America-centric in a lot of problems. And I love when there's a sort of perspective of the world that happens. To give you some context, I'm from El Salvador.
Cool.
And we have had like a very recent boom of tourism here. I live in El Salvador too. Um, and this like might be a tangent, but I think it's relevant. It's a very short story. Um, we
Sure.
have had like a very big boom of like tourists coming from Europe and the United States specifically. So like a lot of developed world people are coming to El Salvador for tourism. I was at the beach one day. It was like a very big popular spot. And I talked to this German tourist who was telling me that a big culture shock that she had here was that people throw the trash in the floor without a care in the world. And how there's no like environmental consciousness, basically, like, because in Germany they recycle and they're environmentally conscious. And she was like, I just think it's really horrible to see people throwing trash on the floor everywhere. There's no recycling. And it made me think like, I think that's it's a very systemic issue because you're looking at a third world where, there's like education is very different. You have a very large part of the population that doesn't even understand environmental issues. There's a lot of like policies that need to be changed. Then there's like budgets 'cause to introduce an entire recycling program in a country, you need finance, right? And I think it just made me realize, like, I think a lot of times people don't really realize that, it's very different to compare the environmental solutions that a country like Germany can have versus a small Central American country. So I love talking to people who can kind of see a lot of that because I think a lot of times us as people, we tend to kind of get very sort of have like one vision and lose sight of how intersected and how like big these type of environmental problems are and how they're connected to just like a whole other sphere, right?
Of course. Yes. In order to have an outcome, right, you have to have an income, right? Because many of these projects and programs and technological advancements require funding, right? Certainly recycling plants and these kinds of things that requires so much kind of development as a concept in the public's desire in order to get them funded by officials, right?
Yeah, no, and like you need like people to also have like because I feel like, for example, for us here, like there's also a lack of education. So it's like you can have these programs, but you also need to educate the public into what the environmental issues are. Only 2% of our population in El Salvador actually goes to college. That's a very small amount of people that actually get any higher education. There's like, I don't remember what the percentage is, but there's a very large percent of people that don't even finish high school. So, it's like such a complex topic. And I love talking to people who can kind of have more of a deeper understanding of stuff like this, because I always think that taking care of the environment should probably be like one of the first things that we care about, because if we don't have a planet to live in, like everything else is irrelevant. Right. But I always want to talk to people who know about this and who understand how like a lot of things sort of come into play to actually be able to help the environment. And like you said, when you actually start to sit down and think about it, it can make you feel very helpless when you're just like one person in your room thinking about stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of jump right into it then, right? Because let's just take this as an example, right, of a problem to talk about, right? The aspect of people throwing trash on the ground is something that happens in many countries around the world. And ultimately, what it comes down to is that you need a shift in perspective and in the way that people think of the trash and in the way that they think of their own communities, right? Most people, I imagine, would not throw trash inside of their own homes. They do the moment that they leave their homes. Plus, in poor countries, there's usually not an infrastructure that helps to move trash, clean places up, maintain general cleanliness and orderliness. It's difficult. Often it's only governmental buildings that have the money to hire someone to sweep around the perimeter or to keep the grounds clean and tidier. So this requires a shift in belief and a shift that things can be accomplished and done even without money. So if we were to tackle something like this, what we would start with is organizing for action. And we would come into schools, we would come into orphanages, we would come into community centers. And the first thing that you would do is bring people together and feed them and provide them with hundreds of free meals for people to pay for their time to hear what we have to say. And that subconscious aspect of eating, breaking bread together, and then speaking with them usually has an effect where people are tuned to be more agreeable, more open, and to have a desire to help. And from there, we would organize zones in a city, maybe even one block at a time. That becomes the responsibility of different groups of people to keep immaculately clean. And even in some of the most downtrodden areas of the city, even working with whoever we need to work with in order to maintain these areas as being clean. And psychologically, what this does to people over time is that when they see routinely, okay, the trash has gone one day, they throw a bunch of things there, and consistently, no matter how long it takes, people are out there again and cleaning it up and maintaining the area entirely for free, entirely with their own labor, entirely as volunteers. And even see if there's potential business model for the garbage that we're cleaning. Could it be melted into scrap? Could it go to different recycling places? Could plastic garbage be stuffed inside water bottles that could then be entombed inside of concrete blocks and could build a school structure or something like that, or perimeter fences, or a designated area in the community for gathering these types of things? And slowly through that, you get attention. And then there's newspaper articles about the trash being cleaned up, or local radio stations that are talking about them, or local celebrities on TikTok or whatever that are talking about this. And you start to shift the thinking of how people believe the city should look and what's possible, right? And you want people to see their ownership of their country as something that extends outside of just their own flat that they live in, right? And something that extends into nature itself as well. And we've done many projects like this in different places. In Liberia, for instance, in West Africa, there's a huge problem with open defecation, where people literally don't have bathrooms, right? So they're just going to the bathroom from the streets, right? And it's a huge public health issue, right? So we've built latrines, right? And we build areas where people can go to the bathroom and have some orderliness to a system, because it's that disorder that if left to its own devices, nothing will ever get better. It's hard to be inspired without making the life of your children or family better in a filthy environment, right?
Yeah.
So it's like very important from a psychological level. And even just seeing a street that's been dirty for as long as someone can remember, suddenly becoming clean, you'd be surprised how much it inspires people, right? So there's all of this kind of environmental work that can stem from something as simple as a trash cleanup.
I think that what happens with environmental problems sometimes, and feel free to correct me or jump in whenever, is that once you fix an issue, you discover that there's another one, right?
Of course.
Yeah, like it happens so
Life is like that.
yeah, pretty much. Because I feel like, like you build public bathrooms to like address the public defecation problem, but then the bathrooms don't get cleaned. They're also disgusting. Like it's and then it's like, okay, now we have to figure out a cleanliness thing so that people are not grossed out by the bathrooms. And then you do that, and then it's like, oh, okay, now we need to find like funding to like always keep these, like, do you know what I mean? Like it's a constant thing that you have to be doing all the time in order to make it work. I feel like that's just kind of how the world has operated, in science in general, of like fixing something and then realizing that something else needs to continue to get better until you reach to a point where it's pretty sustainable.
Yeah. So it's the aspect of like building capacity. This
Yeah.
is something that affects organizations, it affects families, it affects whole nonprofits, businesses, right? Capacity is so important, right? And in a society, if you have everyone striving to make things better, right? That's a mentality that starts in childhood, right? Which is why I believe childhood education is so tremendously important, because through the environmental narrative, right? What you don't want to do is educate people that the problems are so significant that we don't know what to do. Neither does no one else. And why does any of this matter anyway? We'll all be underwater and dead in 100 years anyway. Right. So why does anything matter? And it's this kind of like postmodern nihilism, right? That you don't want to have getting anywhere near young people, because what you want them to do is to believe that they are indeed the future, because that's the truth. Right. And there's so many things that someone can do, especially if they start in their own home and then work outwards from there. Too often people jump into wanting to change laws or legislation. And I understand wanting to change broken systems. There's no shortage of broken systems out there. Right. But too often in trying to change broken systems, sometimes the most important work gets left undone, which could be just a trash cleanup of a market street that everyone goes to on a Saturday or Sunday. And wouldn't they immediately notice if all of a sudden overnight the trash was gone, right? And then you could do a art campaign with signage or something on social media that talks about how that happened and how it's going to continue to happen, right? As opposed to someone trying to, affect something at a very high level that might take 10
Yeah.
years to do. Right.
I think when you think of everything in a large scale, it's gonna feel overwhelming. Um, my first job, I remember my boss, the first job I ever had told me, like, you don't want to look at a project as like, I need to build um a system, right? You want to think of like, I want to go and sit down and get a cup of coffee in the morning and turn on my computer. That is what the actionable item that I have to do is turn on my computer. I can't build a system if I don't have a computer. So it's like, thinking of things that's like smaller, in a smaller scale, is going to be a lot more achievable than thinking of these big plans that are time consuming and difficult to even fathom sometimes.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Yeah. It's just, like, difficult. I also, wanted to ask you, because you guys do different types of, like, you spoke about the focus areas, right? Like, water, energy, waste. Obviously,
Food
they
ecology.
overlap.
Yep.
Yeah, but is there any specific area where you feel like right now there is a lot more need or more focus that there needs to be on than, like, versus the other? Or do you think they're all equally kind of just at the same level?
I would say if someone was going to focus on one thing, food is one of the most important. The reason is because everybody needs food. And when we find ourselves in food shortages, people turn to the natural environment to get their sustenance, right? So all of a sudden, especially in the emerging world, right, you have people enter national parks and forests and eat the wildlife, right? So, but in the United States, right, you have people who are very food insecure, unfortunately. Many communities across the country and across the state of Florida, where I'm in, which is now the third most populated state. So, food is tremendously important. Now, food, of course, you want to try to lower the carbon impact of it, right? So you want to try to think local and buy local, right? think global, act local, right? So buy local as well, right? So things don't travel a tremendous distance. You're cutting down on carbon. You're keeping money in your community, right? Don't be ordering stuff off Amazon and Tmall if you can find things in local markets and stuff like that. So very, very important in that aspect. Also, right, you have the aspect of in building garden infrastructure in places, there's an opportunity to make money, which is really important for powering entrepreneurship and the next generation of environmentalists, right? If you can start not just a farm, but a whole farmer's market in a food desert, if you can get a hold of some unused lots or roof space or build some container gardens in 5-gallon Home Depot buckets or literally found materials, right? You can grow a significant amount of food and bring that to market and sell it, right? You can create deals with local restaurants to provide them with local food. All of those things are absolutely possible, but you're also having a huge impact in local ecology because by having a garden and utilizing organic methods to farm it, you're feeding pollinators, you're providing soil bacteria that are harnessing carbon out of the environment, you're increasing local biodiversity, you're decreasing water use on lawns, and even you go an extra step and utilize composting, right? You can entirely curtail your own food waste stream and the food waste stream of everyone in your home, right? So just that one aspect has so many different tendrils of positive impact that is tangled up within it, right? That it's a great place to start, right? And food is very universal, but it's also very personal. So we'll have communities that are full of, people from different places. There's a big diaspora from maybe Colombia in that community or from Haiti, or people who are from Mexico, right? And they'll have different peppers that they grow or sorrel or different kinds of, vegetables and stuff. And that helps to maintain culture, right? And local culture as well in some of these areas, especially areas of high immigrant populations. So that's really exciting for people. It makes them feel like home. It makes them love their community. It makes them want to get out and volunteer, right? So it's like, okay, it's not enough to just do an environmental project, right? Can you build community and the love that people have for this kind of brotherhood and sisterhood that we need in the climate movement, right? So that's how people should be thinking.
I think you spoke something about some. Oh my gosh. I think you spoke about something really important, which is that in order to make something long term, it's involving a community and then making it a lifestyle. And a huge thing that I think you mentioned it earlier was kind of not making nihilistic and apathetic, having a nihilistic and apathetic youth, which I think is happening a lot nowadays. I feel like I'm Gen Z, but I feel like younger Gen Z because I feel like I'm on the older side for Gen Z. Um and Gen Alpha, they're very negative about just the world in general. There's like this just entire apathy towards a lot of things because they think, oh, like the environment sucks. Inflation is horrible. There's no chance I'm gonna buy a home, blah blah. And like I don't feel like I was that defeated when I was 19 years old. I didn't have thoughts of how terrible my life was gonna be. I still had hope that, when I was 30 or whatever, that I was gonna like somehow, without a plan, be really successful. I feel like that was kind of like how my youth operated, with being a little bit more full of life. I think nowadays, I think that's a really big issue. Is I've noticed that the younger people are very, very apathetic and very kind of just like, I don't want to have children. I don't want to like do anything. I just want to die. Right.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking actually, right? I mean, the narrative that I can do anything if I put my mind to it is what allows me to do literally anything if I put my mind to it, right? I mean, we built our organization out of a dorm room and raised millions of dollars a year to power environmental work all over the world. We have tens of thousands of volunteers and have done work in almost 40 different countries. We've worked with 4 former US presidents on both sides of the political aisle. And do you really, really, really believe in the power of everyday people? If we had that viewpoint of, oh well, we'll all be dead in 100 years anyway, it's best to not do anything, right?
Yeah.
Then, you know,
We wouldn't be here.
we wouldn't be here, right? Exactly. We wouldn't
Yeah.
be here, right? So like, it's really important for people to hear this, that the narrative that everything is for nothing is extremely wrong. It's wrong on a factual level of multiple metrics that I can bring as artillery to pound it into the ground, but it's also wrong from a a a humanitarian and mental health perspective, right? Because
Yeah.
it shrinks people to being more of an object of their own oppression, right? And especially with a growing narrative of decolonizing thinking and really taking a stand for building the future that we want. Being defeated is the quickest, cheapest, easiest route to be an object of your own oppression. And that is why I think that, um, you know, people don't talk about this enough, right? If you now have the fact that you're defeated and will never amount to anything in life as part of your narrative in middle school and in high school today, um, it makes things tough, right? So what do you do about that, right? Well, you show that that's not the case, right? And one of the best ways that I love to do that, right, is to get young people around other excited, brilliant, driven, hardworking young people who will stop at nothing to do something difficult, right? And don't shy away from difficulty, right? So, you know, these things are a muscle that requires exercise and work, and it can start so small. It can start like, gee, I'm going to cut out single use plastic in my life, right? Or gee, I'm going to uh, decide to start supplementing some of my diet with things that I grow myself. Or I'm going to go out of my way to only buy local and support small businesses in my own community. Or I'm going to start my own business and be the small business that people buy from in my community because one doesn't exist, right? That kind of thing changes the world, right? At a local level. And I think that globalization and global thinking is certainly important because certainly from an empathy standpoint, right, to where we want to be able to empathize and recognize and understand the things that others are going through around the world. That's tremendously important. But to think that if we can't snap our fingers and solve the totality of global problems to where everything is agreeable to everyone instantaneously, and if that's not the solution, then it's not worth doing, is a big mistake.
I think like whilst it's true that we do have a lot of oppression, a lot of like negative things that are, happening, and I don't think that that's like something that's um I guess it's not a thing that has happened that is just happening in the modern age. Like if you look at in history, people have had to face oppression in tons of different ways throughout history, throughout their lives. Um, and the reason that we have always been able to progress is because there's always fighters who are like, this I don't like it, and then they kind of change the status quo. So like you said, kind of being defeated is probably the worst way for you to protest or complain or like, just be unhappy about all of the terrible things that are happening. And I don't think that that's a single problem to a country or a location. Everywhere that you look into, even like the most perfect place is going to be having some kind of issue that needs to be addressed. Like I think I always here in El Salvador, they always put examples of like Scandinavian countries. Like they always say like, oh, like in Switzerland, everything is perfect. And like in like Norway, everything is perfect. They always talk about those countries about how like, like they have like great environmental stuff. They have like great healthcare. Everybody's like nobody's poor. And they always put them as like the forefront of like, we should be like them. And I always think like, well, yeah, but they also have like mental health crisis, right? Like they always talk about how a lot of people have depression. They have like, I don't live in Scandinavia. I don't know what the problems are to like tell you that everything is perfect. Like I think it's like a process of trying to get better and kind of glorifying certain places and thinking that they have no issues and that life is perfect is a really negative way of thinking, because I think it also puts a lot of times people in a position where it's like, well, we're so far away from being there that like, who cares? Right.
Yeah, I think, of course. And, you know, uh, it's certainly good to look to examples of people who have things that are working and that you can then emulate, right?
Yeah.
But it's another thing to say that, you know, maybe one society is broken to the extent that it can't have
That it
those
can
things
get fixed.
be achievable, or that there's any utopia, right? As you said, it's part of being human. Right? In fact, I don't think anyone can actually be truly happy unless they identify massive problems to solve, period. Right? Because we're human beings. We need struggle, right? And suffering to reach our full potentials. It's impossible to reach your full potential without struggle and suffering. So if you don't have that, people are bored, they do drugs, they are lazy, they become, disenfranchised with others, maybe hyper competition focused, right? Just because they don't have anything to do of meaning or value. So I think
Or
that there's really something to be said about people to like, hey, if you're a young person who's unhappy right now, go get to work, right? Go pick a cause in your community that you're passionate about and work your ass off on it, right? So hard that people are shocked, right? And like that's the path to not only feeling better, but having such a powerful upward spiral that you take all of your friends and family with you, right? In an upward spiral. And it's like that's what people, especially in the environmental world, need to look at, because it's just way too doom and gloom. And it's that element of the environmental world has never been to my liking. And I've wanted to be a biologist since I was 5, and I started volunteering for nonprofit organizations when I was 11. Right, so I have been in this field a long time, and I'll tell you, the doom and gloom narrative has never inspired me or caused me to jump to action. It's
yeah.
it's been an annoyance, if anything else.
I think that's a great note to end this on. Guys, be more positive, have more hope for the
Agreed.
future. We are the future. Um,
Optimism.
yeah, we need to like, I think it all starts with you. We can't fix corrupt laws and governments and big issues. We can't, but you can do what you can, right? I think it's a great note to end it on. And I think it was such a great podcast to have you on. But before we finish it, I do want to give you the spot that if anything that we spoke about today resonated with our audience, if they want to donate work with you, you're looking for work, anything, the floor is yours to plug right now.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'd love for people to just learn more about us. So the best place to do that is through our website, which is ideasforus.org. So IDENSFORUS.org. And we are ideas for us, not ideas for me, not ideas for you, but ideas for all of us, right? So very important. And also you can find us on social media as well. We're Ideas for Us on Facebook and Ideas for Us Global on Instagram. And once you follow us on those things, you'll see many, many opportunities to get active locally, to reach out to us, contact us. And certainly we are a nonprofit that loves to partner with other people and other nonprofits. So if you're out there and want help to power your action projects, raise funding, strategize, understand more tactics of how to organize for action in your community, I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. I will be adding the links to your social media and your website on the description of this video so people can easily access it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Clayton.
Absolutely. Pleasure's all mine. Great to meet you.
Great. I will see you guys on the next episode.
You've been listening to Unified Purpose, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest. And to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.